Okay, we are learning tonight the Sicho of the Farbrengen of Shabbos Parshas Beshalach, Tu B'Shvat, because today's Tu B'Shvat, today was Tu B'Shvat, or yesterday was, for those who are in Eretz Yisrael. And the year is Tavshin Chavav, 1964. The Rebbe says, Yidua Piskam is known the saying, Sha'amar Rabbeinu Nisienu, that our Rebbes have said, Kama Palmim B'Shem Rabbeinu Azakin, many times repeated over in the name of the Alter Rebbe. The Rebbe says it's already been printed, but the Rebbe stressing that it's been printed means to say that when something is printed, it means it's the olam vod, it's forever. So therefore, this is not just an idea that the Alter Rebbe was talking about a few hundred years ago, but this is relevant till today, that we have to, a person must live with the times. Hainu, lichyos in parshas Shavua. To live with the times means a person must live with the parsha of the week. Means you have to take insight from the parsha of the week. Ki kol ha'inyanim hava ha'ma'urais shememeshach ha'shavua yesh lam shayches in parshas Shavua. Everything that happens throughout the week in a person's life is connected. They could find a connection to that in the parsha. When moving from this is understood. When it comes to Parshas Beshalach, which falls out, B'chamisha Asa B'Shvat, in the 15th of Shvat, Shegam Inyani Shachamisha Asa B'Shvat, Rosh Hashanah L'Ilan, the idea that the 15th of the month of Shvat, which is the New Year's for the trees, must be connected to the Parsha of the week, which is not just that there happens to be that the 15th of the month falls out in Parshas Beshalach. It's for a reason, because it's Shayches V'Kosher in Parshas Beshalach. It has to be connected to the Parsha of the week. V'Inyan Zeh Mudgesh V'Parshas Shavua Chasidus. The Rebbe says, to find the connection between Tu B'Shvat and the Parsha of the week, you could see it clearly in the Chassidish Parsha. What's the Chassidish Parsha? In Torah Or. The Alter Rebbe's teachings of the Parsha, Torah Or, one could find very much a strong connection between the concept of Tu B'Shvat and the Parsha of the week. Barichas Yaiser, and even more, in more details, one would find the connection between Tu B'Shvat, and we'll see in a second how, and the teachings of the Maimarim, the Chassidus of the Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek. And the Rebbe says, Shahashana, this year, meaning the year of 1966, which is Tavshin Chavav. The Rebbe says, hold on a second. The Rebbe says is 150 years. 100 years, the Stalkus Eilul of the passing of the Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek. And also one will find also as well insight about the connection between the 15th of Shvat, which is the Rosh Hashanah of the trees, of the new trees, with the Parsha of the week in the Chassidus and teachings of the Rebbe the Marash, Reb Shmuel. Shekinira Musad al Mamar Tzemach Tzedek, which he also founded his teachings of Chassidus on the week on his father's teachings. He elaborated it, the Rebbe Marash and his father, the Tzemach Tzedek. The Indian, what is the connection? It says, "Vehi b'shach parasam," and it came to pass when Paro allowed for the people to leave. It means the people from Israel, for the Bnei Israel, the Jewish people, to leave Eretz Mitzrayim, to leave Egypt. So Mevor b'Torah Or, in the Chassidish Parsha, in Torah Or, it teaches us Shal Yisrael beGolus Mitzrayim Ksiv, that how do we understand the Jewish people, what it meant in a spiritual way about the Jewish people spending time in Egypt. So he quotes the verse, the Alter Rebbe quotes the verse that says, V'zerati li ba'aretz, I planted you in the land. And it says, Kodesh Yisrael Hashem, the Jewish people are holy toward God, Reishis Tfuasa, the first of its harvest, the first of the wheat. Shisrael, meaning to say, Shisrael Nikru Tfuas Hashem. The Jewish people are called as if the wheat of God. And like when for wheat to grow, you have to plant seeds. And the first and best of the harvest, like Bikurim, we give it the first of the fruit. So the Navi says in Yirmiyahu, Kodesh Yisrael Hashem. The Jewish people are holy to God. Reishis Tfuasa, the first of the first of the harvest. And the Alter Rebbe says, for instance, for example, a person who plants wheat, Aderech Mashal, it's what's the Alter Rebbe saying? is that you have, hold on a second, Rio, that you have, a person has seeds that you get from the wheat. It's not an outside product. The way you plant the trees, the wheat, is you take the same seeds that you got from the stock of wheat, and you designate part of them to go back into the ground to be part as a source of growing more wheat. If a person is always going to keep on planting and planting and planting and using the seeds to plant more and more and more and never have any plants to use the wheat, so what's the purpose? So what is the purpose? Why would a person take from the seeds and put it back into the ground? So there's a reason. The reason a person plants back in, so it says, because it brings down Shisrael Nikrish Tvuas Hashem, V'hu K'may Adam, like for example, a person, say Reya Tvua plants the wheat, Adarach Mashu, on page 81, those who are following along, page 81, the fourth paragraph, we're trying to understand the connection between Tu B'Shvat, the 15th of Shvat, which is the Rosh Hashanah for the new year, for the trees, the new year of the trees, with the Parsha of the week. So the Rebbe says that we can understand it from the teachings of the Alter Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek, and the Rebbe Marash, that they talk about the idea of what does it mean that the Jewish people were in Mitzrayim, that we left Mitzrayim, but what does it mean to be Mitzrayim? So he says it's like the example of wheat. When a person plants wheat, it says a person plants wheat, al derech mashal, b'shvil hatoisis sheyitzmach, is only because you're going to get more. If you put a little bit, the idea is like in an investment. You invest a little bit of money to get back more money. Otherwise, you're just going around in circles. And Alter Rebbe says over there that Shapari Hay Meshalach Paris Va'anofim Va'oisei Pri Koloshin Akasib Yecheskel Va'itila Geffen V'tas Badim V'tishlach Prois. Let's see what he means with that. The idea is to make fruit out of what we have. So he says, "Ubemaimer at Tzemach Tzedek, the Tzemach Tzedek's moisiv he adds, shereishis tfuasa hainu gamkin reishis lebchinas peres ilan." The first of the trees. We know that wheat is considered a tree. In theory, there's even an opinion that says that the tree of knowledge was wheat. K'mavur b'gamatar ar mashal in the Gale Paris. Shenoitin chartin echad v'tzemech ilan shalom me'anofim harbe, that you plant one seed and you get from it a huge tree with many branches. So too, that means the idea is basically that the reason the Alter Rebbe is saying the reason why the Jewish people, like a seed, has to go into the ground and decompose and go through the difficulties. It's not an easy journey for an individual. I mean, we never look at the experience of planting from the perspective of a seed. No one really tries to get into the psychology of the seed. We're people, and we want to eat. We want to flour. We want the food. So we're looking at it all about the benefit. That if I'm going to take a seed and put it back in the ground, I'm going to grow out more things are going to come out. And because of that, I'm going to have more to eat and more to sell, whatever it is, it's a business or if it's personal. But you're only looking at it from your perspective. But what about from the perspective of the seed? For a seed to go back into the ground, it's not desirable. The seed already went through birth, so to say, and it's part of a stock of wheat. And it says, okay, use me as what I'm supposed to be used for. Make me into a piece of bread, make a bracha. Right? Do something with me. No, I'm going to put you back into the ground. Well, I'm going to put you back into the ground because you're going to come back and be a whole bunch of more seed. I'll have more wheat. But for that to happen, the seed has to decompose and dissolve and go through bittul, and only then it could come out to be something of growth. Same thing the Jewish people in Mitzrayim. So Hashem says, looked at the Bnei Yisrael before Mitzrayim and says, this is not the kind of people I want to give the Torah to. In order to give the Torah, you have to go through the experience of Mitzrayim to come out to be this more solid growth of what's going to come from you, even though it's very difficult for you to go to Egypt from your perspective. So he says, again, the first of all trees, like it says in Torah, when it comes to fruit, if you plant one plant, From it comes many trees with many branches. There's a tremendous return, even if it's difficult from the perspective of what's being planted. You put the shayrek, you put the branch. The people they graft, right? You graft the vine back into the ground. The purpose of it is that a stronger, more energetic vine comes out of it. It's a branch to graft. There's a branch. A shayrik is a branch of a vine. From that one branch comes a full plant for to grow grapes. If you just leave the branch itself, I don't know, to have grapes, a little bit of grapes. But if you put it back in, you graft it back into the ground, come out a whole fresh vine. So that's the whole purpose. So right away we understand the connection between the parsha of Beshalach that analyzes Yetzias Mitzrayim, and in order to understand what it means to leave Egypt, you have to first understand what Egypt is. You can't appreciate leaving Egypt if you don't understand Egypt. And therefore, the Alter Rebbe in Tarar, we may learn this mimer this week, talks about what does it mean to leave Egypt, and he describes it like planting something, planting or grafting. So it says that's the connection between Chamish B'Shvat, the Rosh Hashanah for trees, Koilim Yuchad Geffen, and specifically also a vine of grapes. Shehu Elon Mishivas Aminim, that we know that the Geffen is one of the 7 special fruits that were blessed to Eretz Yisrael. Shinshtabku b'hem Eretz Yisrael, Kumesh Kosev, Eretz Geffen, Eretz Chito Geffen. That one of the 7 fruits that the land is unique is with the grapes, with the vine. Okay. Now the Rebbe, and that's the Rebbe saying. So we see, like they say in Yiddish, we see a gang, we see a pattern of what does it mean to be connected to the concept of Tu B'Shvat, to the idea of Beshalach. Now the Rebbe is going to explain it more elaborate. To understand what the Alter Rebbe, Tzemach Tzedek, and the Rebbe Rash are talking about. What does it mean that Pari sent the people? Start with that. The Rebbe says, like the Rebbe started off the Farbrengen, the Medaf Lebim mit Zeit. We have to live with the times. That means that when we learn Parshas Beshalach, that's the mindset we're supposed to be in the entire week of Beshalach, not just Shabbos. So the Rebbe says that's connected to the whole week of Beshalach. Ubefrat le'im Shabbos Kodesh, specifically on Shabbos. That everything we've toiled in, everything we've focused on throughout the week should come to have an elevation in the week on Shabbos. Means we're going always constantly in a reverse pyramid, right? Means we're taking 7 days of the week and we're bringing it all back into one with Shabbos. So every week is this experience, and in the week of Beshalach, what is Shabbos? Shabbos is a culmination and a completion and an elevation of all this 7 days of the 6 days, the previous 6 days of the week that we've been learning and toiling within the message of Parshas Beshalach. Like it says by that God completed the heaven and the earth. What means completed? That you complete all the days of the week come together. It gets complete on Shabbos. Also, both your material week and your spiritual week have an elevation, because we don't separate it, as that person says. So we don't the idea of Torah and mitzvahs is that while we carve out the holiness to identify the holiness, the ruchnius of every situation, the spirituality in every situation, but it's not that the spiritual is one thing and the material is another thing. It's together. It's like a neshama b'guf. It's like a soul and a body. So we have the gashmius and the ruchnius, and both of them we toil in through the week. Our gashmius needs and focuses of the week, and our spiritual needs and focuses of the week, and they should be together like a soul and a body. And it gets an entire elevation on every Shabbos. Misalim b'yem Shabbos gets elevated on Shabbos. Ad lebechinas hatainug. And what is the ultimate expression of elevation? To person to have pleasure from your toil. What does it mean pleasure in your toil? When you see what did it say by Chul Shemayim? God looked at his creation and he was satisfied. He was satisfied with his work, with his week's work. God was satisfied with his week's work. I mean, who wouldn't be satisfied, right? In 7 days, you created the world, animals, everything, the whole thing. So it says it's tainug, it's pleasure. Shabbos is v'karasa the Shabbos oinig. Shabbos is pleasure. It's not an escape from the week. The pleasure is the elevation of the week. What does it mean vayichulu? Complete. Proper completion is that it reaches the level of pleasure. You're satisfied. You're genuinely satisfied with your week. That's why we constantly have in Yiddishkeit cheshbon nefesh. What's cheshbon nefesh? Every night you're supposed to, or in the morning right away when you wake up, you're supposed to have a clarity of what you've accomplished in that day. Because in order to properly have an elevation, you can't just let a day slip by. You know, if and it could be that Sunday was very important, then you took Sunday to clean your house, but that's part of you have to be able to elevate that experience and to bring it to the point of tainug, of pleasure. The kafishim evarit samach tzedek shveichudum leshen tainug. Bari ikar inyan hatainug ubiyam Shabbos. And where does a person get pleasure? Is Shabbos. Like it says, v'karas the Shabbos einig. That Shabbos was called einig, pleasure. Mitzvah l'angay. The whole point, the whole focus of Shabbos is to identify the pleasure of Shabbos. Take pleasure spending time with your family, and take pleasure in the foods that you eat and the company you spend with, etc. And that's all to elevate into that space of pleasure your work throughout the week. And this is all brought down not just in ideas, but also in the laws of Shabbos. So it comes now the Rebbe, it's all a hagdama. So when it comes to Parshas Beshalach, so what is the pleasure of this week? It's in the Beshalach with the message of the week, which is Beshalach. And all the other things that are talked about in the Parsha, which are the idea of Shira, the song, both men and women. In Haman, we learn about the man that came down from heaven, the bread-like food. In Aslav, we learn about the bird kind of food, whatever it was, a kind of bird. And know, of course, what's music? Music is an expression of pleasure, of happiness, of satisfaction. Food, hopefully, brings a person satisfaction. It's all connected to Beshalach, which is the name of the week. Seemingly, the Rebbe says it doesn't make sense. Now we're going to start analyzing it. Beshalach koyal pari, who, when we say the words, we literally translate the first verse of the parsha, it's Vayi Beshalach, who sent the Jews out? Paro sent the Jews out. He says, get out. Kayal Pari, B'shach Pari Sa'om. Vimkein, Ech Ef Shaleimer. She'inyan Ataynik Diyem Shabbos. V'chein Kol Shar Yonim Anaylim Shebe Parsha Zu, Kashim B'shach Pari. The Rebbe say, if the whole focus of the week is about the pleasure of the week that we learn through the message of the week, and the message is what the Pari sent to Jews. How does the person find pleasure in Paroi being part of the conversation at all? Power is that represents death, destruction, slavery, oppression. So prat apia yidua she'inyan atayni ge'echali yisrak b'davar ikri v'loi b'davar tafel. Here the Rebbe says that there's someone gets an ice cream or something. A lot of times you see it in food. You have to identify what's the ikr, what's the tafel halachically. You have to know how to make a bracha. So here the Rebbe says that it's known that tainug is only in the ikr, not in the tafel. It's interesting that the Alter Rebbe says that. Not always necessarily one finds that in food, right? Sometimes people love to eat the crust, or sometimes some people love the sprinkles on the ice cream more than the ice cream itself. The Rebbe says, what is the difference? How do you identify what is a want and what is a pleasure? A want is after you have pleasure in something. A want is the idea of want is the things you have to do. A ratzin means that you don't necessarily take pleasure in ratzin. Ratzin is the want stage. The pleasure is the bottom line. So therefore, the Rebbe says the bottom. You have to analyze you can't take pleasure in a secondary, because taining starts the whole cycle of motivation and strategy and all the components that leads a person doing it. A person can't be motivated by a secondary thing. You can't take pleasure in a secondary thing. When it comes to pleasure, pleasure has to be focused on the target, and the target has to be the main part of it, and that therefore you have secondary parts, but it's not that can't be the target. The target has to be the pleasures in the ikr. So he says that's the difference between tainig and ratzin. That ratzin can be focused also on secondary, because in order to have a setting of the target of the main thing, you have to have secondary things. But that's a ratzin has to include that. But tainig is only the bottom line, the ikr, the main thing. Shiratzin yecheli iskam b'davra tafel. Dugma gives an example. It says that koifin oisay in halacha it's brought down the concept of koifin oisay atzemi roitzani. There's a Jewish law that's applied that when a person in the days that the Bezdin had the strength to, and today also it's been used many times. If a person doesn't want to give a divorce to his wife, the idea of in Judaism the wife cannot divorce the husband. The man has to divorce the wife. The wife can make it very difficult for the husband to divorce her. She cannot accept it. She can do all kind of things that would prevent the husband from the divorce. Until today, according to some people of the Bezdin, it's almost 50-50 of who sometimes in a difficult divorce situation, it's not always the man who's withholding the divorce, sometimes it's the woman. But the halacha is that if the man doesn't want to divorce the woman, so the Bezdin is allowed, Haidab Shimon on page 82, the husband is allowed, the Bezdin is allowed to force the husband to divorce the wife. The problem with the divorce is one of the conditions of divorce, halachically, is the man has to want to divorce. So how do you make the man, how could you force a man to want to divorce? So it says that they would hit the person until he said, okay, I want a divorce. But so the question is, what do you mean I want a divorce? You don't want a divorce. You just want the person to stop hitting you. It's not real. So it's brought down. The Rambam brings down, it is real. Why is it real? Because it's not you really want to do what Hashem wants. If the Bezdin sees that you're supposed to divorce your wife in this situation, as unfortunate as it may be, the Torah says, the Bezdin says, in your situation as a husband and wife, you guys have to separate. And therefore, you should want to do what Hashem wants. And it's just your Yetzer Hara doesn't want you to do it. It's your ego that gets in the way. But if you really analyze it, if you wanted to do what Hashem wants, Hashem would say, in this situation, you have to get divorced. So therefore, it is saying, when you say, I want, you really do want. It's just your ego, your Yetzer Hara, the evil side in you that's clouding your judgment. But here we see that there could be a situation where you don't really, the want is kind of clouded. You're forced to say, I want. Still considered a ratzin. Because Torah says, if you said I want, you want, because it can connect to your inner want. Because, like we said, ratzin is connected to secondary. You only take pleasure. A person, tainig is connected to the main thing. You don't take tainig again. In foods, it's interesting because in foods sometimes you find that a person takes pleasure halachically. We go into halachically when it comes to bracha. We tackle the subject of when a person likes certain parts more than other parts of the food, which bracha is the main bracha, what's the ikr, what's the tafel, what you make a bracha on, etc. Here the Rebbe says, how could it be? Here the Rebbe is going into a very interesting concept of this. That how could it be? Nothing could exist without God wanting it to exist. Right? If God doesn't want something to exist, it wouldn't exist. But then why does evil exist? How could it be that God wants evil to exist? So the answer is here. The Rebbe answers in one little and a half a paragraph. That want could be secondary, and part of the world's makeup, as unpleasant as it may be, is certain unpleasant things. That's how the world was created. There's good and bad, and part of this So there's a ratzon, there's a want to keep the bad, the negative there. For that's part of God's plan of creation. For there to be the challenge, for there to be the obstacles, for there to be all the difficulties, but he doesn't take pleasure in it. So ratzon can be connected to something secondary. Secondary is, of course, something negative. Something negative is, of course, secondary. So there's a ratzon for it to exist, otherwise it wouldn't exist. But we don't say God takes pleasure in that. Pleasure is only in holiness. So God takes no pleasure in the negative, in the tumah, in the impurity. You do it like it says, they don't. I don't like them. God has no pleasure and satisfaction in negativity. And even the want that keeps, otherwise the negative wouldn't exist. It's not, we know that in want, there's what's called pnimis haratzon and chitzonis haratzon. Pnimis haratzon means what I really want, and chitzonis haratzon, known as secondary want, is a setting, right? When a person wants in your life, I mean, even look at it in your house, in your clothing, there's a lot of things that are considered secondary wants, and there's real wants. For instance, even your job. According to Chassidus, a person's job should really be a secondary want. Why? So when you have a good job and you could provide for yourself, and you could find time for yourself, and you could provide for a certain standard of living, you should be able to do the things you really want. What's the things you really want? That I should be able to give tzedakah, I should give charity, I should be able to learn, I should be able to give money to basic Knesset, I should be able to teach. I mean, so you have your setting, and you have what you really want. So the Rebbe says that the klipa is connected to want, otherwise it wouldn't exist. But it's not an essential want. It's a setting want. In order for the world to have balance, there's good and bad. But there's no real want for it, and surely there's no pleasure in it. So it's only chitzonis haratzon. Avaloi pnimis haratzon. K'mevur b'Tanya, as this old is explained in Tanya, chapter 22. The Rebbe says, top of page 83. What does this all mean? We're trying to figure out why are we, before we even understand to connect Tu B'Shvat properly to the idea of Yetzias Mitzrayim, we are trying to understand what does it mean Beshalach Pari Asam. Why are we focusing on Pari? Pari sent the people out of it. Why are we mentioning Pari in the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim? I mean, we know he's part of the story, but we're celebrating that Pari sent the people out. And the idea is, what we said in the Maimer, obviously this is connected, but the Rebbe spoke about it in the Maimer. He gives an example, famous example that Baal Shem Tov gives about one of the ideas of difficulties of life. He says, the Melech, there's a king, he has his only son, the only son that is going to survive and continue in his legacy and his dynasty. So he has one son, so what he wants, how does he raise his son? He could spoil him at home, and what good is that going to do, right? So he takes his only son and he sends him off to a very far place of his kingdom. Why? Because then he gets better pleasure to see how the kids make their way back home. As long as the son, the prince, is by the father, the king, we don't know, we haven't exposed or developed the king's son, the prince's talents. Everything the prince wants, he has. He's hungry, they feed him. He's cold, they dress him. He needs something in his house, he asks the servants. He's in the king's house. So he's spoiled. He hasn't tapped in to his own personal survival skills. He hasn't gotten into his own energy, find out who he is, to develop his own talents, because they lie dormant in his being given anything he needs. He never has to go through any difficulties to find them. So only when the king doesn't want to send them away. But the only way the king could make the prince into being something is by sending him away. So as long as the king is by the prince is by his father, we don't know his potential. Only when we send the king this prince far away, and nevertheless the prince says, 1 second, I'm a prince. How do I behave? No one knows who I am. Am I going to just become like one of the locals? Then we understand who the prince is. When the prince has to continue to be the king's son, but no longer in the king's house, and that gives the king proper pleasure to see how he behaves and how he finds himself in an unfamiliar place. This is what it means when Pari sent the people. Only through a person going into exile, like the son who's sent away from his father's home, V'shibud Mitzrayim, not just exile, but also the enslavement of Egypt. It means sometimes you're not home, and then sometimes you're not home, you're enslaved. Things are difficult. because you're not home. That's like the seed. The seed will never become a tree. If you take a seed and you leave the seed and say, listen, it's a seed. I want to respect the seed. I feel bad for the seed. So I'm going to keep the seed in a cup or in a jar on the table, right? Some people like to keep seeds in jars. So eventually it will rot because seeds don't last forever and nothing will come from that seed, right? We won't know anything. There'll be no fruits from that seed. There'll be no children from that seed, right? The seed it's not going to have to go through the difficulties a seed has to go through to become a tree. But what's the end story of that seed? The seed is going to rot and you get eventually thrown out. So you take the seed and you put it in the ground, and for the seed to become a tree, it's going to be very difficult. But now that tree gives off its own fruit, and now that tree lasts forever. So and becomes something. Becomes its true potential. And he says through Shiva Mitzrayim, the Sal B'nai Yisrael Madrigan say. So that's the only way the Jewish people came on a much higher level. Because while they were in Egypt, they had to refine all the sparks, the Olam Atayah in the world of chaos. There was all these great lights that had to be revealed. Not only in numbers, but also in quality. And by finding those sparks and becoming the person that you could become through the challenges, you elevate the sparks not just back to their place. Not like this, like the seed doesn't just go back to the table, but it becomes a tree. It talks about in the teachings of the Alter Rebbe. This is what it says on the pasuk about Pari Hikriv. It's a famous teaching. It says that when Paroi is chasing the Jewish people, it says Shehikriv libam b'nei sheYisrael avim sheb'shmaim. So the wording that the Torah uses, the Paro Hikriv. Paro made them closer. What does it mean to be made closer? It's not a proper term. And so the Chazal teach us that he made the Jewish people closer to God by tormenting the Jewish people. As difficult as that was, it shook them up a bit and gave them focus. So we attribute that Paro actually is all his negative, and we're not going to give him a yasher koyach for that. But the fact is, what Mitzrayim did is it made the Jewish people closer to God. That he made himself get closer. A few more minutes, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, this is something that Rebbe was talking about. The Rebbe is integrating ideas he spoke about in the Maimer with ideas that he's talking about at the Farbrengen, because those who were sitting at the Farbrengen obviously listened to the Maimer in the beginning. It says, we explain that sometimes a person wants to give over a etzem seichel means a concept. So you want to tell someone something, but if you just tell them the information on its own, the person can't accept it. So in order to make it relatable to the person, you have to give an example. But the mashal, the example, goes away from the topic of the actual idea you want to say. But only when you focus the person's mind, the student, through the example, can the student actually kind of understand what you're trying to say. So he says over here, it says that you take the etzem seichel and you use it in a mashal or a chida, in a kind of a riddle. How do you bring down the essence? Through simplicity, and the simplicity is through the examples. Therefore, the Rebbe is just saying that why sometimes it's very important to learn the exact translation of the Chumash, because when you start going into the Medrash says this, the Medrash says that, and you don't hear the actual story the way the story is. First, understand the story the way it is, which is called. That's where Rashi was written for the simple explanation. That Rashi says, I want to give the simple explanation. So much so that if Rashi can't find the simple explanation, doesn't say anything, even if there's a medrash that could explain it. So the Chur appears Rashi. What does Rashi say? That according to Pshat, what does it mean? It doesn't mean that that Paro made the Jewish people closer to God. The pshat is simple. That Paro went closer to the Jewish people. He made himself closer to the Jewish people. Means he made himself closer by trying to attack them. He's trying to get himself closer to the Jewish people. He lachem b'nei Yisrael to fight with them. Who ba'ofen shachisarin the guy appears hamedrash shehikish libam sheyisrael avim shebishmayim. So the Rebbe says seemingly Rashi's pshat and the Medrash's pshat is a contradiction. They don't go together. Rashi is trying to say that Paro is trying to get closer to the Jewish people to kill them, to hurt them. And the Medrash is saying is that Paro, through tormenting the Jewish people, brought them focus and they became closer to God. So one is a positive. At the end of the day, is the Jewish people came closer to God. And the other one is a negative. The Paro is looking to get closer to the Jewish people to destroy them. So how does it go? Top page 84. We understand it based on the teaching of the Tzemach Tzedek. It's brought down if for the people. So the simple explanation of this translation of the saying is, if you the story goes that Rabbi Akiva, we're gonna have to just we're gonna have to stop in the middle of this Sicho, which seems to be going in a long idea, and we haven't really gotten into any traction of what we're trying to walk our way with, but we're getting an idea about just we're sitting at a Fabrengen, and sometimes you just sit at a Fabrengen, you get a little bit of insights here and there. So the Rebbe said, I mean, not that everything is full of insight, but we're not getting to the end of it. So here he says that there's a Gemara that brings down that Rabbi Akiva saw Rome in its glory with the other rabbis. So the other rabbis cried, here's Rome who destroyed the temple, and they're dancing and singing. And they felt that that was inappropriate, that was wrong. How could the people who destroyed God's home, who exiled the Jewish people, who sold the Jewish boys and girls into slavery, who did all kind of horrible things? We know the Romans were called the Malchus HaRasha, the horrible kingdom, and they're celebrating and dancing in Rome. So the rabbis cried, they wept, that they felt that was horrible. And Rabbi Akiva laughed. So they said, Rabbi Akiva, why are you laughing? So in short, he said, if someone who goes against God's will has so much reward anyways, has so much good, imagine our reward with the people who do what Hashem wants. So it says, so we said in the Maimer, the Rebbe says, Shaideis alus hanitzutzim, shesharshim bechinas l'mayla me'ratzayin, shehu izeh inin over ritzayin and yimshach la'isir ritzayin and bechinas chad v'lei b'chushban. So here the Rebbe, the Chassidus, it explains it differently. Now, what's the words oivre ritzayin mean? The oivre ritzayin means that the people who go above the ratzin. How does something bad exist? God should destroy anything bad. Why does God keep something into existence? Is because he has to go beyond the right and wrong. That notwithstanding of it being bad, because God has balance, whatever God's great wisdom he has, he keeps things in existence. But the end of the day so therefore they have to draw energy outside of the limitations, because limitations, God shouldn't let them exist. God should say, what's going on over here? How could someone who's evil exist? So he has to override his own system, his own kindness, his own judgment, to allow these things to exist still. But by them existing, Rabbi Akiva says, if you could refine and find the sparks in the negative, so then you get elevated to their existence, which is beyond the ratzon. Means God wants people to be good. But if you engage with bad and try to take out the good from the bad, then you're connected to how bad even existed in the first place. It's a longer topic, which is saying it's simple, just to finish off over here. So I just want to finish off the last paragraph of Sif Gimel on page 84. These are moving. Because specifically by Pari sending the people. Nasi Yoser Tainuk, Bad Le'etzem Tainuk, Fish Mispata Gam Be'inyan, Hashir Shapars Beshalach. The Rebbe is saying basically that only because of the whole story of Egypt and the whole story of the sparks that the Jewish people got out of Egypt, only that brings God pleasure. Not the tormenting, but the growth, the positive that happens to this king's son by being sent away, that gives God pleasure, and therefore you're taking all the experience. It's not just the final game. It's the entire experience gives God pleasure, because the entire experience is what makes the person. And therefore you could say Shira, you have what to sing about. Well, these are all great ideas that are talked about in the Maimorim of this week. We spoke about a little of Shimos in the class of Parsha. We finish here that there's the notes, the sing song of the Torah that the Balkorah sings is higher than the words. There's the song and there's the words. A person could read the Torah without any song, and we apply the song to the words, but the song itself is also beyond the words. So the Rebbe says that the Shira reaches beyond the words because words is limitations, words is ideas, and the song of the words is when you just say something, you're just saying it. When you're singing something, then you're getting to beyond the words. You're getting to the true pleasure because a person takes pleasure in music, a person takes pleasure in song, and it's an expression of the pleasure that the Jewish people have in their going through the difficulties, and from the difficulties they become the strong Kaddish, the strong stock of wheat, gracious to us of Hashem. All right, we didn't get to the end of this of what the Rebbe is trying to tell us, but hope we have something to go away with for the Shabbos table. Laila
So
Tova.
when the Chazan sings, it's even more, right?
Well, the Chazan, if you mean the Chazan singing at the Amud when he's praying, that's not the same singing. That's nice, but it's singing. It's important. We're talking about the singing by the Balkorah, by the reading of the Torah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what the Chazan is reading. I mean, isn't he?
Yeah. So the proper term would be the Balkorah. The Chazan is the person who's praying in the front. But if you mean the Balkorah, yes. When the Balkorah sings, that's
I didn't know what the
yeah,
Bakara.
yeah.
What does Bakara mean?
Balkorah means in Hebrew the person who reads.
Oh,
Korah means to read, the person who reads.
okay.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, Laila Tov, good Shabbos. Take care, everyone.
Shabbos, everybody.